there's a controversy that exists today in which people are saying that there's no law and that the Ten Commandments were nailed to the cross, and therefore we don't need to keep it and the whole 9 yards. Well, first of all, we can't keep the law anyway. But there were two laws. The word law really means instructions, precepts, commands. And the whole Bible could be sort of characterized as the law. Although there are 10 commandments, the whole scripture could be, it's sort of amplifying these 10 basic precepts. In a variety of ways, they might Cain, kill Abel, that was violation of thou shalt not kill. And then, of course, God's law are broad. It's not only going out there and stabbing somebody or ending their life. In law, civil law, and criminal law, you really can't be prosecuted for thoughts. It's only when you do something overtly, you go out there and you attempt to kill somebody or you kill the person, that you could be charged. And so you could get away with hating somebody or even plotting to kill them. They won't know about that. And even if they know, they can't do anything about it. And this is why God only has 10 and the state has millions of laws, because they have to go with all various forms of thou shalt not steal. You have larceny, you have burglary, you have petty theft, you have, just name it. Robbery, with violence, all this kind of stuff. And so there were two laws, as I said, the ceremonial law and the Ten Commandments law. The ceremonial law came into existence in the experience of the Israelites from Abraham's time down to when they were in Egypt and so on, and going through the desert with Moses and so forth. But the Ten Commandments law has always been in existence, and this is what folks don't understand. They think that the Ten Commandments came into existence at Mount Sinai, but when Cain killed Abel, it was a violation of the thou shalt not kill precept or a law. Now, let's look at the ceremonial law. The ceremonial law came into existence when Adam and Eve sinned. The wages of sin is death, and not this death that we will die here, when we get run over by a car or hard staff or we have a stroke or whatever. I'm talking about the death in which you come back no more. That's the final phase of the whole system here on earth. And so, right away, Adam and Eve had to kill a lamb, a certain prescribed lamb, and offer it up to show that they're exercising faith that down the road Christ is going to come and die on the cross and is going to take care of all their sins. Okay. And with Cain and Abel, of course, Cain killed Abel, which is a violation of thou shalt not kill. And the whole deal was that it was about the sacrificial system. He, as a farmer, brought planting and rice and apples and grapes and so on. And Abel, who was a farmer, he had lambs that he could have offered up. But in those days of barter, it was easy. All you had to say, well, okay, the value of a lamb is $20. Here's $20 worth of groceries. Or as a matter of fact, you might have even given it to him as a brother, But he, under Satan's influence, decided that he's going to offer something that can't justify him, because it was clear that you had to offer life, blood, and fruits. When you pick them from the tree, they die. It's death right away. And even if you were to offer the tree while it's thing, it still doesn't qualify. It's not a life. It's not the type of life that requires, or it's pointing to Christ's death, and he's telling you what is going to satisfy, the condition for his death, etc. But when Christ died on the cross, and many people point to the scripture which says, and the law was nailed to the cross. And yes, the law was nailed to the cross, but which law was that? That was the ceremonial law, which, it started pointing to the cross, because when Cain was supposed to offer a lamb, and Abel was successful in handing it, and God accepted his offering. He was in faith looking forward to Christ's death on the cross. And so, yes, it was nailed to the cross, and you don't have to offer a lamb or whatever anymore. Today you have in voodoo and satanic services, they offer life. They offer pigeons around here, and sometimes individuals offer their own life and the lives of others. They sacrifice it for certain things that Satan will give them, etc. But yet the ceremonial law totally was a nail to the cross because there were two parts of it. There was the part that pointed to what you ought to do for sin, and there was another one that pointed as to how you ought to live. Because in those days there wasn't microscopes and so on. And so today we could see bacteria and virus. But way back then, the only way they could have done that was if you come in contact with something that obviously had bacteria or virus, like a decaying body, some carcass inside the road, or something bites somebody and they have some, ugly looking, sores or whatever in the body, and you come in contact with them. You had a certain period in which you had to demonstrate or to be seen whether you had contracted any disease or not. And when the time passed, then everything was good. You did whatever you had to do, and then you go back into the home or into society and so on. It was a kind of a quarantine. And also it dealt with the way you could take care of your health. In other words, these are clean things that you ought to eat, etc. One lady, she put on a priest robe with, or turn back collar, and she's saying that she's blessing the harm, and therefore it's good. When God said that it's not good. She don't understand the principle here, in that God created these animals, and some have a kind of a, what do you call it, biochemistry, such that it's different to ours, in which they could eat things that are filled with harmful bacteria and virus, and it won't harm them because some way in their bodies there are chemicals and an environment in which these bacteria can develop to harm them. The toxins that they may produce will be neutralized. And in eating those animals, it's not only that you may imbibe some of those harmful bacteria and the pathogens that they have produced and viruses, but also whatever was supposed to counteract that in their bodies maybe could harm our bodies too. And so God was saying that these animals you shouldn't eat, and this is the way you ought to operate if you came in touch with somebody who has a illness and so on. So those still are in existence today. Here we have antibiotics and we have microscopes, and so we could see things, and you could, when you come in contact with somebody who has a flu, you could take a flu vaccine or whatever. It might be too late, but if you had inoculated yourself, then you could slide through that successfully. And so when Christ died on the cross that Friday evening, it was the hour that they did the evening sacrifices in the temple. And just to establish clearly what was happening, they were about to offer the evening sacrifice, and the animal ran away, escaped. And there was the holy place in which they were going once a year. And if you go in there sinful and you go in there unauthorized and so on, you could die in there. And then there was the holy place in which they did ministration every day. But on the day of Yom Kippur, this most holy place, the high priest would go in there and he had a rope tied to his feet with bells. And if they don't hear the bells ringing and they hear maybe something fall hard, he was sinful and he died in there, so they pull him out and somebody else will go in and so on. So that temple, that veil that separated the two, the holy and the most holy place, it went in twain. And it showed that Christ's death on the cross did affect the sacrifices and the ceremonial system in the temple. And so, yes, it was nailed to the cross. And we don't need to do that anymore, except you're disobedient to God and you want to get into Satanism and you want to offer yourself as a sacrifice, or your family or your friends or whatever. I know a certain guy here. He's into this thing, offering pigeons and so on. He got an altar and a whole simmy-dimmy. Once he asked me, say, do you know how to do that voodoo thing? I said, no. I said, man, I pay good. I want somebody to help me with that, because he uses that to get business. And I'm advising him, sir, you don't want to play that, because eventually you have to pay for all that stuff. And a lot of times it's with your own life or your family or a friend or something. So he wants me to go up on his roof and do work. And man, if I could fall off that roof, that would be his best sacrifice, But when I'm going up there, I ask my God to protect me so that I don't fall up there and fulfill his satanic requirements of life and blood sacrificing. But it's unnecessary. We don't need to do that, except you're lost and you're mixed up and so on. Because Christ died and he paid for that. This is the end of this section. Later on, produced another one dealing with the ceremony, with the